What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another week of LUMIX Live. I've got some relatively in-depth demonstration to kind of show and talk about and answer some questions about here for the photography base. Obviously, we are continuing. This will be the last week of the photography-specific topics that we've been kind of on a little bit of a series talking about. Next week, we're going to revert and start a 3-week session on the video capabilities for the LUMIX cameras, because we want to make sure that we got even coverage across the board for both photographers and videographers. But this has been really great so far, the last 3 weeks. There's been a ton of really good questions. Hopefully y'all are learning some various different capabilities that our cameras have, and hopefully you walk away today with actually what I think is probably one of the more, I'd say, forward-looking capabilities for photographers that we've deployed within our cameras, and actually being one of the few that's actually doing this in the industry, and that's actually down to some of the partnerships that we have with Frame.io and the integrations into it, because I want to show you some of the ways that I think help maybe demystify how, as a photographer, you could be utilizing tools like Frame.io, since, let's be honest, the vast majority of the conversations you hear about camera to cloud or that side of it are typically being discussed from the video side. Not a ton of conversation about the still side, and I've got a really cool demonstration to show you as to why I think, as a photographer, this is actually something you should probably keep an eye on, because it can address a lot of really interesting use cases, and you don't even have to be a professional for this, which is, I think, where it really actually becomes a heck of a lot more beneficial. Yeah, we're going to be continuing through with that. I am using my GH7 as the demonstration camera, so like always, I've got my feed coming in from the camera, so we can talk about various menu settings, walk through how to set some stuff up. And then we will be diving into things like Lightroom, as well as the Frame.io web interface, because there's a really cool reason why we're going to be talking about Lightroom today. Well, a couple good reasons for it. But before we dive into that, if you are new to these streams, these are broadcasts that we do. We're back on schedule for every Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where you have access directly to us, Panasonic LUMIX, to ask us questions, get answers to things that maybe you're trying to figure out, and actually know that those answers come from the company. These aren't answers that are guessed by those that may not have the full picture or full information. You're getting an answer directly from us. If you want to interact with us and ask questions, or me, because I don't think I have anyone in the chat with us this particular week, tag at LUMIX USA in the chat. I can see that on my side so that I can address your question. If you don't tag at LUMIX USA, it doesn't mean I'm not going to get to your question. It just means it doesn't have the priority because I have to dig through to see them. So if you definitely want an answer to a question, make sure to tag that. And then we'll kind of dive into it. Yeah. Before we dive even further into any of this stuff, I want to remind those in the United States about LUMIX Pro services. We have the Red and the Platinum tier. The Red tier is free. If you've purchased a camera or are planning to purchase a camera, know that you can just use the QR code. Get yourself registered. It just needs the purchase of a camera. For now, get yourself in. It gets you into the program. You get an extended 3-year manufacturer warranty. So if you're someone who really wants to make sure you've got the most out of the back-end coverage of your equipment, but maybe not prepared to pay for a level of service yet, you've got a free tier. If you are someone who likes to have the absolute top level of service from us at the time being, that's where you can take a look at the Platinum membership in the US. The Platinum membership gets you that 3-year extended warranty for all new purchases. But on top of that, you're going to get 2-day repairs with free shipping for next day both ways. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs, so if you drop or break or something that's not covered under warranty, you get a discount on that, so it helps with the pocket there. You also get access to our membership hotline, so you can speak to someone Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If your issue or challenge or concern or problem, whatever it is, you've got an access to an actual phone number for that. And then you also get all the kind of the general stuff that you would normally expect in a tier like this for your service and support. So annual sensor cleanings, lens calibrations, EVF cleanings, and even having us do firmware updates if it's something you don't want to undertake yourself, or if you've got a bunch of cameras, you can send them in to us, get them all set up and ready to go. So if you haven't checked it out already, I encourage you to take a look at them. We talk about it at the beginning of every single one of the streams. You can either use the QR code that's on the screen right now, or there are links down in the description below. If you are not within the United States, we do have the global access link below that, which will bring you to the global portal to see what is available for Lumix Pro services within your region. And yeah, you have access there. It will vary region to region, so just keep that in mind. Not every region has the same level programs, and not every region is supported, but you've got access to some of it there. If your region doesn't support Lumix Pro services at this time, you still have access to the Lumix Panasonic service and support, so you just check with your local region for that. Yeah, so like always, let us start the stream by addressing some of the questions that have already come in prior to the stream starting. So, and primarily I'm going to be addressing questions that are photo related, but there's a couple video ones in here that I can answer pretty quickly, so we'll address those quickly here. Genie Lamp asks, does the XLR1 adapter work on the GH7? Yes, it does. I just got confirmation from Matt Fraser. Unfortunately, I don't have my XLR1 anymore. It's lent out, and so I've only been using the XLR2, but yes, it does work. You don't get 32-bit float, and you use the older style 4-channel, but the camera does have the ability to toggle those 2 to 4-channel options for you there. Cliff asks, GH7 has a 33 minute 49 second ProRes RAW file size limit, no matter what size the card is, 1 or 2 terabyte SSD. Is this a defect? I'm on the new firmware. Cliff, so no, that wouldn't be a defect or anything like that. All card format and all file type systems have caps as to how large a single file can be. So most likely what's happening is you're probably hitting the file size limitation that the card structure has in place. If you look online, this is actually something that just came up recently in news, and for photographers, this is an interesting thing to keep aware of as well. Windows or Microsoft has just actually apparently either has just done it or they're planning to do it. They're planning to update the file size limit of FAT32. Which is a file format structure at a very base level. Don't come at me if you know more than this than I do. But it's one of the reasons why, depending on the card size that you would put into your camera, if you're using SD cards, even in modern cameras, you may find that files get broken up, and primarily in the video side, you may find that files get broken up into various different chunks. Even if you're not setting a limit in the camera, because the cameras do have the ability to set segmented file recording like GH7 does. All that just basically comes down to what's the largest file size that file format structure can read. SDHC memory cards are FAT32 rated, so I believe 4 gig is the largest single file size that you can do. SDHC, I believe, is 96 gigs as a singular file size. I'm not 100% sure what the CF Express or the PCIe rating is on that, but it has similar limitations where a singular file can only be so big, and then what the cameras do is they just continuously record, and it just breaks that file up into the next round of what the largest is. I believe CF Express cards have the same 96 gig limit. I could be wrong on that. But if you're running into where it's always the same file size or the same time limit, just double check the file sizes on the card, Cliff. If they're all the same file size or within a couple of megabytes of each other, that's why. It would be doing that. And it's not going to depend on the physical size of the card. It's going to depend on the file structure that it's recorded on. Yeah. I do want to answer this one from Raz, or R-A-Z. It says, when I have my G9 Mark II off for the night or a few days, it takes about 5 seconds to turn on. Once it's on, I can turn it on and off without the 5-second delay. Is this the way it should work? And Cliff, thank you for jumping in and answering. That's basically the correct answer. There are various sleep states that the camera has employed, and a lot of this comes down to the feedback and the commentary from LUMIX users about if you turn a camera off and say, I'm going to leave it on my shelf for a month, right? Because maybe I'm between jobs that I need the camera for, or maybe in a case like mine where I have to have all these cameras here so that I can talk about them, I may not grab one of those cameras off the shelf for like 2 months because I don't have any reason to at the time. I have the cameras that I like to work with, which is my GH7, G9 Mark II, S9, and S5 Mark II. The deeper sleep state or a longer sleep state reduces battery trickle even lower because it's putting the camera, it's turning off a lot more of the quick start, your hot start kind of features to preserve that shelf life of the battery while it's in the camera. Realistically, if you're going to be storing a camera for a long enough period of time, you should take the batteries out. It's just a safer way of storing your equipment. But the reason why after you've turned it on in that initial startup time and then turn it off and then turn it back on, the reason it's faster at that point is because the camera's not going down into that deeper sleep state mode. So functions for, kind of faster wake up are retained. The trade there is that it's a balance between what do you want for longevity of battery life, and by that I mean how long you can capture in a single thing, not the overall battery life of a battery. It's just a balance between the two. Our response the reason why this changed was because of the feedback we got from the S1 series about standby battery time, and when we made the change and went into the newer system with the newer engine for PDAF support, that's when the change happens. That's why some people may be noticing it. So REZ, there's nothing wrong with the camera. That's the way it's intended to function at this time. But we are always listening to the users and evaluating trade-offs between if that were to change, what could potentially cause, what does that do to battery life, what does that do to longevity. All those things have to be taken into consideration to determine whether or not that's something that gets changed. And that's true for anything that's in firmware updates. Al says, maybe more video than photo, but can we get a deep dive into remote operations and monitoring our cameras via the app? Yes, I do plan on doing an app-specific video, but that's going to be probably a little bit out from right now, because I want to give time for the fact that we've got LUMIX Sync and we have LUMIX Lab. Those are the two main apps. I want to give time for where I can talk about the LUMIX Lab app because we're planning to add S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and the G9 Mark II into LUMIX Lab, and we're always planning to add more functionality to LUMIX Lab. So I want to wait to do that to where it's maybe a little more relevant and it's a little bit easier to translate between the two various apps and why you would use one over the other. So just get subscribed if you're not. We'll be talking about that at some point. Noah says, when using constant preview, it does show what the image will look like. However, when I half press the focus, if the exposure is different from what the camera meter is using, then it changes. I think there was a second part to your comment there. Is there a way to use constant preview without changing when half pressing the shutter button? So this has been asked a lot, especially in the photography side, because this is something where you see it more commonly. The way our system works for constant preview, and I was able to clarify this. The way our system works for constant preview is that while you are previewing the image, so you are composing, you're kind of setting up your shot, constant preview is activated. When you half press the shutter for focus, what the system is doing is it is momentarily opening the lens up to flood the sensor with light through the aperture, so that your focus is more accurate and acquisition can be done faster. If you leave constant preview on and say you're stopped down to F8, you are choking a PDAF system down for light, which can cause challenges for accuracy and focus and speed of acquisition there. Our method with the constant preview system is to prioritize accurate, fast focusing even when using constant preview over necessarily the exact constant or simulation of the exposure at that moment. Primarily here too, it's the fact that while you're actually focusing or doing that initial grab to lock into a point, since it does it in continuous as well, when you're doing that initial, there's not any changes that you're making at that particular moment. So that is the way our system works at this time. We have gotten the feedback about wanting to potentially change that, and that has been passed the engineering team to evaluate, is that something that we can change with firmware? Is that something that would require a new model? All those kinds of things are being talked about with it. So yeah, at the moment, that's how the system works. Nothing's wrong with your camera, Noah. It's just, or Al. That's just how that, or no, that is actually Noah's question. So that's just how that works. Yeah. Let's see here. Al says, are we able to stack multiple LUTs in, for example, S9 or GH7, as it seems to be the way to work with Arilog C3? Yes. So working with LUTs in the camera, and actually we'll talk about that. This is a good point to start to segue into talking about some of those photo features. You can stack LUTs within the GH7 and the S9. These are the two cameras that have the most recent, the most up-to-date version of our real-time LUT function. However, it may be a little different than you may think. So if you want to layer LUTs together, the first thing you're going to notice is that you're going to go into your photo styles, and like always, we talk about, we have the real-time LUT option in this camera. Now, the real-time LUT option in this camera, the actual named feature in photo, is going to be based on standard. You'll notice that I can't change what that base profile is linked to, at least in this method that I'm doing it. And I can only attach one LUT to it. So it's very straightforward. If you want to layer LUTs onto your photos, this is where you go to the My Photo Style options. The My Photo Style options are what are going to allow you to come in and change what that base profile is. So I can change this to say, like if this particular profile is actually based on, say, Cine D2. So I can set that as my base. Then as I scroll down, you'll notice that the LUT option is much further down in the menu. This is where I've got LUT 1 and LUT 2. So this is where I can toggle them on and off and change which ones I want for my particular look. So yes, you can 100% layer your LUTs on there. If you're working from a video perspective, and say you're working with Arilog or you're working with Vlog in this case, because I'm not in a video mode, I can't access Arilog. So if I have Vlog here, I can very easily come down and say, hey, I want this one look on it. I want to adjust the opacity. Say this is my 709 conversion, and then my LUT 2 is my stylistic look. 100% you can do that, but it's got to be done under the My Photo Style options. The photo side, this is nice because if you've got various different stages to your editing, you can do that. So like say you have a kind of, like if you're a studio portrait photographer and you use, say, like color checkers to create a profile in your studio of what those colors should look like, you can create a LUT from that based in Photoshop, and then kick that particular LUT out, load that in as one, and that would be like your color accuracy LUT, right? And then you can do LUT 2, which would be my stylistic edit to it. So if I'm adding like various different tone curves, if I'm doing this, you can do that. You can save it into one of the 10 available My Photo Styles, and there you'd be able to basically streamline your JPEG workflow. The nice thing is that, as we've talked about before with real-time LUT, is that if you're capturing RAW and JPEG, your RAW files are still going to be your RAW files. So you're still going to have full flexibility there. You're not going to have to worry about adjusting or changing anything there. When you bring it into your software, you'll be able to just work with them like a regular RAW file. And if you have the .cube files, or your LUT files, you can reapply them in programs like Photoshop. And I think some of the other photo editing software, standalone software, does add support for stuff like that now too. So yeah, you'd be able to take advantage of all of that, honestly. Let's see here. Tree says, I wish raw processing function can be able to output 16-bit TIFF files. I like to shoot vlog stills, then grade them in Resolve using power grades, but 8-bit JPEG is not enough for that. I can understand that. Since I only need huge TIFFs for a very limited number of money shots, processing speed or size is not an issue for me. It will be even better than 10-bit HEIF. We've definitely heard the comment about wanting to see TIFFs in the cameras. I think TIFFs in the cameras pose some challenges, and a lot of it I think does come down to file size. But it is something that we've heard. I don't think we're going to be deploying TIFFs in the cameras, but we can pass that info on and just kind of add it to the list of like, hey, these are requests that we're getting from users. And yeah, as a stopgap for that, 10-bit HEIF files would be an awesome thing to see. That's another one that we've asked them about, our engineers about. So yeah. Let's see here. Young says, if you assign AF modes to the FN button on the lens, we'll cycle through all the AF modes directly without showing a pop-up menu. I hope function button on the body can do the same too. I have asked about this. I don't know if the FN button on the camera would do that, but we can ask to see like, hey, is there a way to do that? To have the on-camera, or at least make it an option. Usually lens function buttons end up prioritizing speed over necessarily like every aspect that you would need for it, so sometimes that can be why the lens would give you a faster way to go through it. So let's see here. Lumix Tape says, I hope Panasonic can consider to provide Lumix made fine-tuned DCP or ICC camera profiles for Lightroom or Capture One, just like vendor provided conversion LUTs or IDTs for the video world. Interesting. So this actually brings me to one of the points I want to talk about actually with Lightroom. So this question here, about camera, these are camera profiles. So these are, if I shoot it in the camera and I'm in Vlog or I'm in Standard or Vivid, I want the software to display that file as I captured it in camera. It's one of the reasons why, like I actually was just talking with someone, I think over on the DP Review forum about this, about how when they're taking a picture, it looks fine in camera, but when they take the raw file, in the off chance that you want to work with that raw file, the image looks underexposed, and there's kind of confusion as to why that is. Well, this is a great example of that here. So this is a raw file from the GH7. So if I go in and we actually take a look at it, you see we've got GH7. This was literally just captured. It's with the 10-25. And when I go into the actual look here, you'll see that I am in Vlog, and this is saying camera profile. The fact is that the vast majority of people are most likely actually using the camera with the Adobe standard color profile being applied. Now, the problem with this is that if I apply this, one, we know that I just stated this is actually a Vlog captured file. So when I go to start doing some of my edits, it's not necessarily in the right plan. It doesn't look like I captured it in camera. If I was capturing in log and I wanted to be able to see that file in log, I can't see that. Well, we have had these for actually quite some time now. These are called camera matching. So if I go into camera matching, you'll see that because I shot this in Vlog, I can click it to Vlog. But what you'll notice is that that photo that I took automatically showed up as Vlog. So how does that work? What sense does that make? So if you go into your preferences for Lightroom or Photoshop or any like Adobe Camera Raw, one of the things that you'll notice is that under the import settings here, you'll have an option for raw defaults. Now, out of the box, Adobe leaves this as Adobe default, which means you're going to be using Adobe's color profiles, which are their conversions of the files for color purposes. If you come in here and you change this to camera settings, this will apply, whenever possible, the settings that you used in your camera. So that means that now these photos that I have imported are automatically being tagged with, in this case, camera standard. But I can go in and click camera standard, and you'll see all of the in-camera color profiles that we have. So these are the profiles that our cameras capture in, because that information gets communicated to Lightroom. So you don't have to necessarily go in there and be like, oh, it doesn't look the way I wanted it. I want to be able to go in and get closer to what my JPEG looks like, but I want to have more flexibility. Make sure you're making that change for the profiles that you want camera settings enabled. That will mimic what you capture as your raw file from the camera itself. So, LUMIX tape, it is there. It's not overtly right in your face, but it does exist there. So, LUMIX understands their cameras better. For instance, they can use sensor spectral function data to make bulk profiles, color. Yeah. Now, the reason why I mention things like color checker, right, is that LUMIX tape, in certain cases, especially in photography case, if you're going to be working in a studio where you need, technically accurate colors, not a stylistic look from any camera brand, which all camera brands, no matter what, your built-in color profiles, so ours, standard, vivid, natural, flat, things like that, they're all tuned. It doesn't mean that they are, to the technical perspective, color accurate. They are styles. They are looks that we've created. As you mentioned, from the video side, we have LUTs or IDTs in the video world. It's the same in the photo world. We do have them. But if, just like in video, if you are trying to create a truly accurate 709 to the color conversion, you would still go through that process in video where you would use a checker, you would go in and you would minorly tweak those colors in. Then you can create a LUT off that and you're good. And there's software to do that. Photo side has the same thing. If I'm working with, say, a skincare client or, say, a lipstick company or a nail polish company, right? I need to make sure that those photos that I'm providing that customer are accurate to the color that they are creating. That the customer, when they walk into a store, that they see that it is accurate. And this is only one stage of it. So a lot of times people will use things like color checkers or like Color Checker Passport or the software, things like that, where if I'm in a studio, I can capture an image in my lighting scenario, in my environment, that is a known patch of colors, set it, have that saved as a profile that then, just like I did with camera standard in Lightroom here, it would replace this. So I wouldn't be using the camera standard, I'd be using the one that I created instead. And you have the ability to, if, say, you're working in projects with Lightroom, and I believe Capture One can do this and the others can do this as well, I can go into raw default and I can just select a preset. So if I have one that I created, I can go in here and say like, hey, for this particular catalog, everything needs to get this color profile attached because that's the studio environment that I captured it in. That's more of a workflow side, but you have that ability. And funny enough, if you do this in something like Lightroom, or not Lightroom, like in Photoshop, you could export that out as a look or as a LUT, so a .cube file, and you could load that into the camera and potentially save yourself some time. That's what the massive flexibility of lookup tables are, especially with real-time LUT, what it's bringing to the table for photographers. We know LUTs from the video side. The reason we continue to use LUTs and we didn't come up with some marketing name for them is because anybody can do a search of LUT or lookup table, and you will already be inundated with a wealth of knowledge that exists from the video side that explains what they are, what their flexibility is. There are tutorials online that explain how they work. Yes, they're video oriented, but it's a lot easier for people to understand a known term than to educate people on a new term for something that already exists. And truthfully, it's better to work on a standard, and LUTs are a standardized component in the industry. So, yeah. Frank says, on the S5 IIX, is there a way to set function button to reset the camera to auto ISO? I know you can set one bringing up ISO, but I would like to have it just reset to auto ISO. So there isn't a button to force the camera to go back to auto ISO. what I typically would do in a case like that, wrong camera, is press the ISO button on the camera and just roll all the way to the left. That point, you just drop it right back into auto ISO. I can understand where maybe you want to be able to toggle back and forth between auto ISO and set ISO. That's how it's got to go for the time being. So, okay. So what I want to talk about right now is something that's actually incredibly cool that I think has flown a little bit under the radar recently, and this is a very recent announcement. And this is actually something to do with Frame.io. Now, Frame.io has camera to cloud. Camera to cloud is the ability to take your camera, in this case GH7, the S5 Mark II or S5 Mark II X, take those cameras, link them directly to Frame.io's system, their backend, without the need of any extra accessories or any additional cost. Link them directly there so that while you are capturing photo and video, you can have your content being sent directly up into their cloud service to be able to, in its initial form, collaborate with others. So this means if I'm working in for social media, like I do content for some of our teams here, like, BTS photos, some short video clips, stuff like that. I can be capturing all of this stuff around at home. I can be doing this mobilely if I'm out in the field, because I can just connect to my mobile device's hotspot. I can have my camera connected, and as I'm on set or out on site, I can be capturing that content's going to the cloud, and the team back, in this case in Newark, can be seeing that content come in real time. So if I need to make little changes, they can let me know right away, and I can effectively change on the go. I don't have to finish the job, get home, upload them, get told that something was wrong, then go back out and recapture again. So it makes the workflow system super, super smooth. But that's a professional's view of this, right? What about those of us that may not be doing a ton of professional work, or we are, but we still want to take some of the efficiencies that exist for professional side and apply them to our more hobbyist, more enjoyable side of this, right? Well, that's where the recent updates that Frame.io did for the beta, and everything that we're talking about is beta still. So you're encouraged to try it, but just keep in mind, this is not a full public release yet, but if you are in Frame.io, you have access to this if you convert into the beta for system for this. So what this allows me to do is go into my Frame.io backend. So right now, I'm in Frame.io. So this is just the back end of my Frame.io account. I have a Lightroom camera to cloud, or a LUMIX camera to cloud Lightroom catalog set up here. And this is where the cool thing comes in. So I can click into this. You'll see you get folders here of whatever kind of content you've got in here. So this is cloud devices. So this is camera to cloud connected. If you want to connect a device to it, you just click on C2C connections. And you'll see that right now I've got my GH7 hooked up to it. I've renamed it. So it's knowing that, hey, I'm going to be sending images there. And we've talked about camera to cloud before, so this part isn't new. What is new is this little component right here, Adobe Lightroom Connected, or Connect to Lightroom. Now, again, I have to reiterate, this is beta. So this is not something that is in the final version of it, and if you've not converted over to beta, you won't have access to this yet. Hopefully this is something that comes out of beta soon, but in the description below of this video, we have links to Frame.io's blog about it, a video that demonstrates what I'm talking about here, so that you can kind of see if this is something that works for you. But what's cool about this is, one, I can have multiple cameras attached to this. So if I have my GH7 is attached right now, I can attach my S5 Mark II, my Mark II X, so that if I happen to grab one of those cameras, cool, I can have it automatically sending. But this allows me to go in here and say, hey, for today, I'm going to go out and I'm going to capture some content. And I don't want to necessarily have to worry about when I get back home, taking the card out, loading them on the computer, having to sit down and do this, because, let's face it, not all of us have the time or the desire to necessarily sit down and offload photos, especially if it's a more casual type experience shooting. So, as some of you may know, I just recently got a new puppy. And what that means is that a lot of times if I get home from going out and capturing photos, I don't really have time to sit down at my desk, go through the process of offloading all my images onto the computer, then importing them into my Lightroom catalog, because I am an Adobe user. I just don't have time for that because I have to take care of the puppy. My wife gets home from work, so usually like we're collaboratively working on dinner, taking care of the dog, all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to do that. That's a headache for me, and if there's a faster way to do it, I would much rather do this. So now, because the camera has been capturing images and automatically sending them up into the camera to cloud platform, all my images are already up in the cloud. But Frame.io just added the functionality in beta to link this to my Lightroom catalog. So now, as I'm sitting here and we're talking, I can have my camera set to capture images. So, and this is done by date, and then it's done by whether it's still or video, and then this is by camera. So I can be sitting here, and if I go to my camera, we're going to capture a couple images here. Let me reduce the power on some of these because I have these up a bit high. And for those that want to know, I am using the Godox X3 transmitter here. This is the little tiny newer transmitter for the Olympus system, which is same. It's just the O version. It's the same flash triggering system we use. So I have that attached, which means I can be controlling my flashes here. So let me just adjust these so that they look a bit better and are not super blown out. So I can be capturing images. Say I'm working in a studio, say I'm just out traveling. And what's cool is that you can see as I'm capturing some of these images, they're loading automatically up into the back end here. But I have that Adobe Lightroom connected thing set up. So now if I go in here and I go into my Lightroom catalog, you'll see that I've got the images automatically populating into my Lightroom catalog. Now, I will be very clear about this. Is this a replacement at the moment for hardline tethering to Lightroom or another kind of program on the go? No, it's not. Because this relies on polling to the various different cloud catalogs, which is why I am prefacing this with, as someone who does professional work, but also enjoys having a camera with me and capturing content day in and day out, capturing my life, photographing the new puppy, all that kind of stuff. As someone who likes to do that, but hates or doesn't have the time to necessarily come home, plug the card in, go through that whole process, I now have the ability that while I'm out capturing all of these images, this stuff is automatically loading up into my Frame.io catalog and being synced in the background to my Lightroom catalog. So now when I get home, I can sit down after I get all the stuff done and the dog's taken care of and we've had dinner and all that kind of stuff. I can sit down at my computer and immediately start working on those pictures. I'm not having to worry about, I got to offload this stuff, then go in, then put it into the catalog, then go through the process of editing them. I can literally just sit down and start editing them. If you're in a low stakes professional environment for photography at the moment, and again, caveat being this is still in beta, I have that ability that I can be capturing, and even in this case, if I have an off-site editor, while I'm doing the photos and stuff, yeah, we've got everything in camera to cloud so that you can be doing the collaborative side, but I can also still automatically be having this stuff loaded into my Adobe side so that I'm ready to go. I'm not having to worry about that other process. My off-site editor, a friend that's looking at the catalog, can be starting to actually work on these photos while I'm having a conversation on site. Even before I leave site, they can be doing the edits for this so I don't have to even worry about it. It makes a really cool, solid experience for us. Now, if there are those of you that are, maybe you don't use Adobe Lightroom, but maybe you're interested in Frame.io and the camera to cloud side of it, you still have access to be able to take those photos, get them into camera to cloud, get them into Frame.io, and then you have the ability to then know that, one, they're offloaded, so you don't have to worry about taking the card out. You already have them in a cloud platform, and you have the ability to then pull them down as the originals into your computer later. It's not as slick as a workflow that is built in with the camera to cloud function and Lightroom. But also, if you're someone who uses Adobe Classic, Lightroom Classic, if you're someone who still prefers maybe not having everything up in the cloud, but you prefer having those copies local on your computer, you can use Adobe Lightroom Classic. You still have to enable web sync or the cloud sync with Adobe, but you can tell the software, hey, I want to sync with the cloud, but cloud items, so items that I have that are going to be synced from Adobe Cloud, I want to have them stored locally when they are synced up. That allows me to then take those files, have them syncing in the background on Adobe Lightroom Classic, but as they're being pulled down and added to the catalog, I can have them automatically being offloaded and stored to a hard device on my computer physically. So if you prefer having everything else local, you can then use the cloud service as basically a go-between, so that while you're doing everything else, those images are automatically going up and then they're archiving on your machine. The benefit here is that if I am capturing out on a long day, I can leave my PC on throughout the day, and yes, I'm a PC user. I can leave my computer on throughout the day and just let it run and have access and sync. This way, no matter what, I just leave Lightroom open, and in the background, by the time I get home, those photos are already going to be downloading or almost all downloaded and automatically being stored onto the hard drive on my computer. So I've got the best of both worlds. I have my web backup, which is basically the 3-2-1 rule. You have three copies of your footage on two separate devices, and then or on two different locations, or however that works. So I have 3 copies. I have one on the card, I have one in the cloud, and then I have one on the hard drive. So it gives me that. The only difference is at that point you don't have an off-site location being stored with hard copies for it. So that's what's super exciting, and I think what goes maybe uncovered that often is that we've just been talking about a photography version of why Frame.io and why a camera to cloud function is important for photographers. There are cases where, yes, hard tethering is going to be more important, and we do have LUMIX tether, which lets you do hardline tethering to your computer. That's great, but in some cases, some people may want to work in things like Capture One or Lightroom, and unfortunately at this time, those are things that we don't have support for direct tethering. If you are a Lightroom user, you can use LUMIX tether, and you can have that set up and go into a hot folder that then Lightroom monitors and pulls into the catalog. So that is another workaround for it. I don't have enough experience with Capture One yet to know about whether or not you can do hot folders, but you have that capability. And what sets the LUMIX cameras apart with this is that it is built in. Frame.io functionality is native within select cameras from us. So that means, again, like I said at the beginning, you're not paying anything extra for this. This is a service that's just available on our camera. If you are looking to want to do it, you can go in there. What's nice about the Frame.io system is that there is, what I think is very cool about this, there is a free version of this that you can try. If you've not checked around with this, if this is new to you and you're not 100% sure if it's even something you're going to want to do or play around with or mess with, just go on and do the free storage. It's 100 gigs, so you can actually take advantage of the function that your camera offers. Start playing around with it. You may find that this is actually something that, really works awesome for you. The camera to cloud functionality is there. You have the ability to share it with a couple different members. So even if you're doing this on a very small budget or a very small project, you could have and start working with that collaborative thing. And know that your LUMIX camera isn't going to have anything else extra with it. It's just built into these cameras. And then if you're like me and you realize, like, okay, crap, I really like this, you can always update the plan. Like, I use the Pro plan because I want 2 terabytes of it. And like I said, at that point, it's because my cloud storage is temporary for me. My hard storage is hard drives, my own NAS system, and then off-site backups. So I don't have to rely just on the cloud. I've got all of this, and I can cycle projects through. So, yeah. I encourage everyone, if you have an opportunity, or you have one of our cameras, the S5 II series, S5 II, S5 IIX, and the GH7 all support camera to cloud. So you've got direct access to this. You can start playing around with this now. And I heavily encourage you, if you're a photographer, try it. You just link up with your phone's mobile hotspot. And the vast majority of us, depending on where you live, you'll be fine with the data uploads. Even if you're only doing JPEGs to save file size, it works really, really fast. And you saw relatively how fast that was from capturing the image. Probably under a minute at the moment. And again, it's beta. This is a beta execution of it, but I felt it was important to show everybody because we're talking about photo in ways that we're providing workflow and tools that others in this industry are not. So you've got a one-up, you've got something that can help you streamline everything. And if you're just doing it for the archiving perspective, you're good to go. It's one less thing you got to worry about. Let's go back and take a look at some of the questions that came through here. Here we go. So where are we? LUMIX tape. I hope it's not, that was a duplicate of that question. Create there. Francois says, do you think one day we'll be able to use Capture One Pro with LUMIX cameras? I would hope so. We've talked about this a lot on the streams about how, we have open SDKs for the camera controls. We recognize as a company the importance of Capture One. 100%, it's not something that falls on deaf ears. I know a lot of people like to say, like, we only think about the videographers with our products, but hopefully these last couple of streams are helping show that photography is still an incredibly core component of what our cameras are built for. That's why we're hybrid. That's why these aren't cinema cameras. They're not designed as cinema cameras. These are hybrid cameras. And we're adding some of the we're adding features that only we offer to photographers that no one else in the full frame space is doing. So yeah, I can't say one way or another if Capture One is going to be something that we can do with the LUMIX cameras, but it is something that we definitely have a lot of conversations about. It gets talked about all the time when I'm having meetings with our product development teams, with our merchandising teams, all that kind of stuff. So everyone knows, everyone hears it. But it's not necessarily something that I would have control over for it. So the more you tell us in the comments, the higher the probability of that stuff. Does it say generic German gamer? Nice. As someone who frequently uses focus bracketing for product photography and other macro products, do you plan to finally update this feature and increase its speed? Technically, this shouldn't be a problem. So if you're on the newest cameras, the G9 Mark II and the GH7, and you're using hard-mounted flashes like Godox, and I've tried it on the Westcott flash as well, the flash sync with bracketing for focus does work, but the flash has to be attached to the camera. At the moment, I can tell you that the bracketing with the trigger does not work. I have sent that feedback over to Godox, and I know that our team in Japan knows about it as well. So I don't know how fast something like that could get fixed, what's involved to even fix it. So that's so far above and into the weeds of development and all that kind of stuff. But depending on the camera, we do have flash bracketing functionality. Usually it comes down to the recycle rate of the flash that you're using, which if you do this all the time, you obviously know these things. So we do technically have it. It depends on the camera that you're in. Not all of them have the support. The older cameras probably won't have the support. I don't know if they can get the support because we made a whole engine change on the new cameras. So I'm not sure if code that's involved or being written for the PDAF cameras can be translated back to the other or the older processors that we used. Let's hear Jeff. I usually use Power Save LVF and set it to 10 seconds when doing street photography. Would it affect the longevity of the IBIS unit significantly because it keeps turning on and off? No, not at all. You're not going to affect anything longevity-wise with the IBIS or honestly anything in the camera. One of the things to know is that modern cameras, especially from us, they're designed with knowing like, hey, we're going to put this into a sleep mode normally. That's just normal process. You could argue that the more important thing when it comes to longevity of any kind of component is really always just going to come down to the battery, making sure that, you're not always having a lithium-ion battery kept at full charge all the time, and you're not letting it go 100% flat, like all that kind of stuff. But that's just normal, battery maintenance stuff. That's not anything overly complicated there. As far as the IBIS unit goes, it's a magnetic system, so you're definitely not going to damage anything. There's no physical contact of the IBIS carriage and the plate that it magnetically connects to for the ability to float the sensor mechanism. So yeah, there's no concerns there. Cameron says, just want to confirm that LUMIX Lab only supports transfer to and from the camera, GH7 in my case, JPEG files, MP4 video files. Cameron, so you can transfer RAW files. So you do have the compatibility for that. The LUMIX Lab app currently doesn't support editing those RAW files. So if you do know that you want to do RAW editing, you can still have LUMIX Lab transfer RAW files, and then you can use programs like Lightroom Mobile, which is what I do. I can use Lightroom Mobile and just import those photos into a catalog, which also has that side benefit of Lightroom Mobile. Lightroom's the newer version of Lightroom for the web or the desktop interface means that when I add those into the catalog, they're going to show up in my desktop as well. So, like, where's a good example? Yeah, so, like, this is a good example. So this is my new puppy. His name's Kevin. So he's the new puppy. This was captured on the S9. I was using the 35mm f1.8. I sent this to my mobile device through LUMIX Lab, put the RAW file into this album, and then now it's on my computer. So yeah, you have full flexibility of that. The Lab app itself just doesn't have RAW editing for it. Neon says, any chance we can get anamorphic D-squeeze in photo modes? Also, 1.6 custom D-squeeze would be an option. We have petitioned that for the longest time. Those of you that want to see anamorphic D-squeeze in photo modes, leave it in a comment after this video. The chat is great. It's just hard to go back through because the chat follows as the video stream goes through, so you'd have to actually watch to that point, see all the comments come in. Leave those comments as comments on the video. Matt and I have been trying to get this done for a long time. It's a hard concept to understand as a photographer, the value of it. But like all features, the more you tell us what values you have as a photographer, the easier it is for people like Matt and I and our counterparts across the globe to bring these to our engineering teams to say, hey, look, this is what people are asking for. Is this something we can do? So yeah, I would love to see it. I know Matt would love to see it. So, McCary says, following up, is it possible to have AFC use zone, AFS use one area, and have those choices stick? At this time, no. I have had this request before, and I have passed it into our setups here. But at the moment, yeah, it doesn't allow individualized settings that way. I don't know if that's something that can be quickly done, but we can always bring it back up. It is a good idea. I personally really like that idea too. Macarius says, could LUMIX Lab allow us to stack photos on the go from LUMIX bracketing mode? We don't have in-camera stacking on the G9 Mark II. Would be great. Confirm stack is okay in the field. It would be interesting. I don't know. LUMIX Lab is still obviously being updated. We're obviously adding new functionality to it over time. So ideas like that are great. That helps our engineering team, our software team look at it and say, hey, I would love to see XYZ features in it. That's why I do these streams. These are incredibly valuable because you get to have a voice in what we do with our products. You get to ask us questions if you don't understand something. You get to help us determine what we want to do for the next generation of cameras, what we want to do for firmware updates, and then app development. So that's another one, McCary. I would recommend if you leave that as a comment on the video afterwards, it'll help us so that when we reference these things to the engineering team, we can point to a visible comment instead of saying, hey, go to X, minute, or send them a link that way. It's usually a little bit easier. Let's see here. There was also one of the things I wanted to double check here. So I'm also looking at the comments from last week's video, because I had mentioned to some people, hey, if you have a question I didn't get to it, drop it in the comment here. I think McCary said for bird and McCary, this is what reminded me, because this was your question. For birds in flight, especially those flying towards and away, how should AFC custom settings be set to acquire birds faster without losing lock-on settings after it does? Any tip to getting to acquire faster, not lose birds when it leaves the AF area box before lock-in is established? So I did take a look at some of this stuff to kind of try to come up with better settings for you. I didn't have a chance to get out there and actually test any of them yet, because it's been it's 103 degrees right now Fahrenheit in Austin. It's close to 40 C for those not in the US, those using a logical measurement of temperature, in my opinion. So I honestly just haven't had the ability to get out there and go do it yet, and it's been way too hot to actually be able to go do any of it during the day for my own safety or my own sanity. Realistically, I recommend acquisition. The smaller the target, so using things like zone are probably going to be a little bit faster potentially at acquisition. I would also try the difference between back button focus or shutter. Try which one you seems to maybe work a little bit better for you. But I am still going to look and try to dig a little bit further into check with some of the wildlife photographers that I work with, see if they have any tips for you. Yeah. So Jeff says 100 gigabytes for free. Yes. Yeah. The Frame.io stuff, it's one of the things I think people don't realize, that you can try Frame.io. You just got to sign up for it, and they have a free version that you can just try. It's awesome. When is Arilog C3 for the GH6 coming? The firmware update was pushed for that camera already. You just have to get the SFU3A, I think, the unlock code for it, and then do your activation. Harry says, Sean, in the beginning you talked about preview. My tip, use aperture priority as your base, and then preview. You see the real picture and how the aperture effect changes the picture. Yeah, that is one of the other options for constant preview. So if you've not used constant preview on our cameras before, or you've not gone in and seen any of it before, if I can remember where it is. So under constant preview within our cameras, you have a set option now, and this is on the newer cameras. The older cameras don't have this level of control. I can go in and I can change effect. There is aperture and shutter speed, or there's just the aperture mode. So typically I'll work in aperture priority and set it that way. But you have various different options there for you. We hear people's questions about wanting to see a different way that our constant preview works. We hear you. I just don't know if it's going to be able to be updated fast. So, McCary, yep, checked with that. So I also find the TC14, TC20 affect the AF. Could these be updated for PDAF? So, in a case with teleconverters, usually what you're seeing is not an effect because of necessarily firmware or anything like that on the adapter. What you're seeing is the fact that teleconverters cut the light that is physically getting into the sensor. So, and this is kind of related to that the constant preview conversation. You kind of have a choice with PDAF, and this is one of the downsides of PDAF. I know everyone likes to say, PDAF is, like the silver bullet, it's like the end all be all of solutions. PDAF needs light. If you use teleconverters and you're using a relatively dim lens, your aperture values are dropping much lower as it is, which means the amount of light that's hitting the PDAF diodes is lower, which can cause slower acquisition and can cause issues of miss because you're lowering that level down. If we go back to the DSLR days, it's why if you ever looked like on DSLR cameras, usually you had PDAF points, but they were only in the middle, and it was a separated system. But usually, like, your center point was a cross type, and they were usually rated for like f2.8, things like that. Your outer ones, usually PDAF on DSLRs typically stopped around f8. If you went down past f8, you didn't have PDAF and your focus was trash. Modern cameras have contrast AF as a backup to it, which is why you don't have as many problems. And the aperture value at which PDAF becomes non-effective has extended out as technology has gotten better. But in some cases with teleconverters, that's where you can run into some issues there with the PDAF. The other thing that you can try too, because like we said, our constant preview, the way it's designed, and this is why it's designed the way it is that it opens up to the maximum light available to be flooded into the sensor, so that you can minimize some of those challenges. The other methods, you'll notice cameras that don't do that or don't have an option to do that. Typically what you'll notice is that in tests, the low light AF performance, lock-on and stickiness, that is an area where in some cases we can actually perform a little bit better because we're doing that flood the light with sensor to acquire the subject and then lock on. Outside of that, I leave it up to those that test, because you've got various different, what's the word I'm thinking? Variables that can affect those things. Are there any insights on new firmware update? Even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Will we potentially see C2C in the G9 Mark II? It's an interesting question. I've asked, I haven't gotten an answer back on that one yet. If you're a G9 Mark II user and you want to see camera to cloud in the G9 Mark II, drop it in the comment after this video. Like always, the more you let us know, the more you make your voice known in the comments of our videos, the more ammunition Matt and I have to go back to the engineering teams and the software teams and say, hey, this is what people are asking for. Can we do it? Not a photographer. How does anamorphic help in photography? So this is actually a really good question. So while anamorphic is known as a video specific, kind of effect and look, and we're used to seeing movies in anamorphic, there is a massive spur for photography to want to emulate that look and feel, because anamorphic has a very unique look and feel. And with tools now like the the DJI, the LiDAR, the Focus Pro or the Grip thing, being able to now add a focus system to anamorphic lenses, and combined also with the lower cost of anamorphic lenses flooding into the market, photographers really enjoy, I know I do, being able to use the fact that if I have a 3x2 sensor and I've got a 1.8 or 1.5, 1.6 or 1.8, one of those anamorphic lenses, I can do a D-squeeze and I could be shooting cinematic looking stills. And I know I hate using the word cinematic, but I can get the character of, the oval bokeh in the background. I can get the effect of the way compression works with an anamorphic lens, because it's very different than a spherical lens. So as a photographer, a lot of times we want to try to emulate those looks, and you kind of get close, but you don't really get the full effect. If you want the typical anamorphic lens flare, there are hacks that you can do to get that, but if you're doing it with a proper anamorphic lens, it just looks so much better. So that's why photography's, starting to look at it and say, hey, this could be something pretty cool. And anamorphic lenses give a very specific character. Similar concept as to why, a lot of people have an obsession with old vintage lenses, because the way they render an image. It's the same with anamorphic for photography. Where was that other one? Hi, Sean. I've been shooting some photos today, experimenting with different apertures, but for some reason I couldn't get crisp, sharp images. One area plus, zone, full, shutter speed between 125 and 1/320th. Thanks again for your stream. Super appreciative for this. Yeah, it could be a number of things. it's a harder thing to kind of identify, like if you're not getting super crisp, sharp images there. It could be anything from maybe 1/125th or 1/320th might not be fast enough. And I say it just because I don't know which. One more question: is there a social account where you can check out pictures from Lumix users? Yes, Lumix USA or at Lumix are two Instagram accounts. At Lumix is the global account. Lumix USA is the US one. That's where I can interact on. So back to that point. Could be a number of variables. It can be if you're out at really long telephoto range, there's a couple things you have to take into consideration, like atmospheric impacts, how far you're shooting. Are you shooting over a body of water? All that kind of stuff. Weather can make a change there for long telephoto shooting. But if you're doing things like portraiture or like studio photography, there's a couple things that don't necessarily always become super clear to people, especially if you look online and you see a bunch of these, like, you know, portraits, right? And they're like hyper crisp and hyper sharp. Vast majority of the time, it's not down to whether or not you can nail focus or whether or not you have a fast enough shutter speed. Most of the time, it's because flash is used. If you've never used flash for photography before, even if you're outside, and this is an area where I think a lot of people misinterpret these days, that flash has an incredible benefit outdoors as well. Even on the go, if you've got plenty of light where you don't need a flash, flash has a lot of benefits there. Because flash photography, the way it imparts the image to the sensor, or back in the day in the film, it's immensely faster than what your shutter speed is. So depending on the flash, we can go way deep into that too. You have what the flash's actual time is, the duration. Really high-end flashes have a really short duration, so it means that flash actually fires its full power faster than what your shutter speed is. Your shutter speed ends up just controlling how much ambient light gets into it. But what you would notice is that if you take a portrait without a flash and then take a portrait with a flash, details become so much more crisp with a flash. So that could be part of it, depending on what you're trying to photograph. If it's like massively out, then that's where you take a look at, like, okay, one, is the lens firmware all the way up to date? What lens are you using? What aperture are you using? Is the shutter speed fast enough for what you're trying to hand hold? If you're on a tripod, is your tripod stable enough for it? There's a lot of variables that go into that kind of stuff. But if true top of the line sharpness is what you're after, you got to go flash for photography. Rick says, hey Sean, silly question. With all of the cool new features like volume photography or the Frame.io stuff, why aren't these features available in the flagship MFT G9 Mark II? Processor speed? No, it's not a processor speed thing. When we look at things like not Frame.io, when we look at things like volume photography, like the fact that we added those to the S5 II and the S5 IIX, a lot of those things come from the research that we do and the work that we do in evaluating what market those kind of features are for. And they get deployed to the most representative camera to that particular market. So at the moment, volume photography, full frame is a major part of that. And that's where we got the vast majority of the requests for. Doesn't mean we can't do it on the G9 Mark II. It just means that we're just not at a point where we're going to do it on the G9 Mark II yet. But the more people like yourself let us know, like, hey, this is what I do, and I use Micro Four Thirds, or I use G9 Mark IIs, and I really want it, it gives us the ability to kind of go in there and say, hey, let's see if that's something doable or viable. When it comes to things like Frame.io, Frame.io, you have to remember, the initial concept of Frame.io has been video up until recently. And that's why I wanted to take the time to talk about it today, is that when it was conceptual, or not conceptualized, because I don't want to speak for the Frame.io staff on this, but the market in general looks at Frame.io and the workflow concepts as, hey, I am a video user, I need proxies for collaborative workflows. It already has well set up integration into things like Premiere and Resolve and all of that. So at that point, it really looks and says, like, okay, that's why the GH camera has it. That's why the S5 II and the 2X have it, because they're widely regarded as incredibly capable and powerful video tools. Now, now that the Lightroom side of it, and looking at what they're trying to do about, kind of giving the photographers an experience in how to utilize this tool that you may not have necessarily thought was designed for you. Now that that's happening, it helps inform and say, hey, maybe this is something that would be beneficial to the G9 Mark II. Because remember, G9 Mark II, when we launched it, it is not a video first camera. Yes, it has a ton of high-end video features, and we have all these conversations when we do briefings and all that stuff with it. Yeah, it has really high-end video features, but it has those high-end video features because we don't believe in gating stuff like that. You buy a camera and it's a hybrid camera, it should be able to do it. That's like the whole point. And it doesn't cost photographers anything. There's the fallacy online about how all these video features mean that the photographers have to pay extra for it. Sure, in very limited cases, there are those kinds of conversations. It's why the S5 II versus the S5 IIX was launched. The S5 IIX having things like all intra and ProRes and RAW over HDMI included out of the box, versus the S5 Mark II not having all intra, ProRes, or the ProRes RAW over HDMI as part of the price, meant that we were able to bring the cost down on that camera. But it's not like a general overarching thing there. So, but yeah, it's kind of lost where I was going with that. Yeah, so it's a matter of, at the time, G9 Mark II, not designed for video, so it didn't really make sense for Frame.io because it's just not what that camera was targeted for. But now that the photography side of the push for Frame.io and the camera to cloud and the seamless integration into things like Lightroom are becoming available, it does beg the question to readdress and see if that's something that makes sense to have in a camera like the G9 Mark II. So, hopefully that answers the question. All right, I got time for 2 more questions, and then unfortunately we do have to wrap up today because it's already 1:15. McCary says, regarding stabilizing a lens like the 100-400, could a gimbal handle that, or gimbals only for shorter focal lengths? So, yes, but not the gimbals that you'd be thinking of. Let me see if I can find one here. So there are gimbals for photography. But they're not gimbals like you're thinking about. Let's see if I can find one here quickly. Yeah, okay. So I'll pull this one up here. So, from a photographer's perspective, these are what typically, if you go out to like, all the birding festivals where everyone's got those giant, long, heavy full-frame lenses for long telephoto shooting, you'll see that the vast majority of them have them mounted to something like this. This is a gimbal head for stills capture. You unlock these 2 knobs, and it gives you the ability to pivot on a singular point and have the support so that you can move the camera, and you eliminate the the handheld nature of it. Stabilization is great. In-camera image stabilization and dual IS2, they are spectacular. But there are certain areas where using the proper equipment or using equipment that's better suited for what it is that you're trying to do can help you get a better result in the end. Ultra long telephoto, photography, birding, wildlife, stuff like that, these can be a big benefit to you. And they're not overly expensive as long as you've got a tripod that can take the head here. Like this one in particular, it's $80. And this is just a random one. I have no affinity. I don't know anything about this Magnus brand. It just was the first one I clicked on. This can help a lot. It can really help getting the ability to say, hey, I want an ultra stable shot. And when you use something like this, you'd probably turn the stabilization off in the camera, in the lens, because that's what this is for. And you just shoot at faster shutter speeds. These can definitely help. It's going into that concept of using the right tool for the job. IBIS and stuff like that, and being able to get, being able to utilize the vast majority of these high-end new features that are added is great. But in certain cases, we have to remember that going in and saying, hey, using the right component, the right tool, the right accessory still can trump all the features that you may put into the camera. So, yeah. It's crazy. My camera has more features. There's an anti-Lumix bias. So I wouldn't go as far as saying there's an anti-Lumix bias with some creators. Because truthfully, this isn't the YouTubers or the creators or anyone like that I work with. I've never heard that from anybody. But in general, it's that idea of if I can't see it, what value does it have? That kind of thing. And we're not the only ones that get it. Across the board, every camera brand has those comments coming into them. Let's hear. Adding my voice then towards refreshing non-sealed lenses with weather sealing the Nocticron in particular. Yeah, I would love to see the Nocticron updated, but I don't think it's high on the priority list at the moment. Awesome, thanks. I should upgrade my own wheelie tripod with this head. Yeah, gimbal heads, or I think they're also called Wimberley heads. From years ago when I was on DSLR, they made a huge difference for me in capturing. Yeah, so thank you everybody. So Tax says, how does my camera send pictures to Frame.io? Do I need Lumix Lab app for that? So really quickly here. What you're going to look for is, so there are select cameras of ours that support Frame.io at this time. GH7, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, and I can't remember if the GH6 does. I don't think the GH6 does. It might. It's been a while since I looked at my GH6. What you'd look for is under the settings menu, you'll have an option called Frame.io, or it's Frame.io. It's not Frame.io, it's Frame.io. If you have that, that's where you can then do the connection for it. We've talked about Frame.io, and in the description of this video, there's resources from Frame.io that can walk you through the process, show you how it works, get you kind of information about that. So I encourage you to go take a look at it. So honestly, I encourage everybody, no matter what, if you have a camera that can do Frame.io, just try it. Doesn't hurt anything. There's a free account. You don't have to pay anything for it. If I remember right, you don't even have to put in a credit card for it. Just fill your information in. You get 100 gigs of storage for free with it that you can play around, try with, see if it makes sense for what you want to try to capture, and if it works with your workflow. Because truthfully, every single person I've shown it to, once they've used it, it's been like, okay, I legitimately am not going to not use this anymore. I'm going to have this, and I have a place where this works within my workflow. So, okay, with that... thank you everybody for tuning in and the awesome conversation, the awesome questions. This was great. Y'all are awesome with the feedback that you give. Again, if there are, as we talked about through the stream, if there are certain components or things that you want to see in firmware updates, ways that you want to see the cameras evolve, let us know in the comments after the video. Obviously, the more you comment on our videos, the better it does for the algorithm, the better it helps us with this channel and all that kind of stuff. You know, helps with those engagement numbers. But two, it allows people like Matt and myself and my counterparts across the globe to be able to reference something and say, hey, look, this is the voice of the consumer. This is the voice of photographers, videographers, professionals, amateurs, hobbyists, new users. This is where we can help and really try to say, hey, this is what y'all want. So I encourage you to do that. Let us know. Sound off in the comments. I can't believe I just said sound off in the comments. What am I... yeah. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. We'll be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. As I mentioned at the beginning, next week, for 3 weeks, we will be diving into the video side of the conversation. And maybe I'll be able to talk Matt into maybe joining us for one of those, because I'd really like to get into the weeds on some of the conversation. And Matt, it's been a while since Matt's been on the stream. I know he likes doing them. If y'all want to see Matt in next week's stream, just comment under the video. Literally just comment Matt in the comments. Because then I want to show that to him. You know, give him a really big ego with it. Yeah, so video will be for the next 3 weeks. Very specific into the topics there. And then we'll get back to some more general topics and things like that. So other than that, have an awesome rest of your day, everybody. Get out there, create some cool stuff. Check us out on Instagram. It's at LUMIX USA or at LUMIX. At LUMIX USA is the one that I see and I can interact with. follow us on TikTok if you don't already. If you're someone who likes to doom scroll and just, you know, kind of have a bunch of funny content, we've got a bunch of stuff that goes up over on TikTok. Some funny skits, some really good educational stuff in small bite-sized pieces. And yeah, with that, cool. Other than that, I will be back next Thursday, and I will talk to you later. Comment box happens after the video ends, and it goes posted. All right, later. Bye.